thank you everyone for joining us for day 2 of Subsurface Live 2023. We've got another day of fun-filled talks lined up for you all today. And to kick it off, we're very excited to have a panel to talk about data mesh. So why are we here? Data mesh is a very hot topic in the data ecosystem, but one of the questions we hear most from practitioners, anyone undergoing data mesh or interested in data mesh is, how do I implement data mesh? How do I go about on this journey to build a data mesh at my organization? So to do that, to answer those questions today, we've assembled a star-studded panel to talk through that. And I'd like to introduce the first panelist, Zhamak Dehghani, CEO and founder of NextData. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
All right. Our second panelist, I'd like to introduce Raja Peru, who is an architect and technical manager at Shell. Thanks for joining us, Raja.
Good to see you, Raja.
And last but, oh, actually not last but not least, I'd like to introduce Tomer Sharan, who is the founder of Dremio. And last but not least, joining us all the way from Italy, so happy to have him here, is Ugo Chirachi, who is engineering leader and business unit leader at Agile Labs. So everyone, give a big round of applause so he can hear us from across the internet. Ugo. All right.
Hi.
Hey. So,
hi everyone.
So we have a range of expertise on the panel today. We've got founders, we've got builders, we've got consultants here who advise companies on their data mesh journey. We're very fortunate to have a range of expertise of people focused on different areas. So let's get to know everyone. So each of the founders or each of the panelists here, I'd like to ask you to tell us about who you are, what you do, and how you're related to the data mesh conversation. Zhamak.
All right. I'm Zhamak. I guess my official title is a troublemaker. I created the concept of data mesh. I spent a few years implementing it with customers. And at the moment, I'm trying to build a technology to serve the developers with their experience of building data mesh. I'm the founder CEO of NextData.
Awesome. Thanks, Zhamak. Raja?
Hi, I'm Raja. I'm a technical manager and architect at Shell. And I have like 20 years of experience working on data warehousing and data-related projects. And in our recent journey in Shell, like we have worked on the data mesh for our project. So I'll be discussing about that here today.
Tomer?
Hey, Tomer, I'm the founder and chief product officer of Dremio. And if you're at this conference, you're probably familiar, at least to some extent, with Dremio. We're a data lakehouse platform and helping hundreds of enterprises and other companies on their data mesh journeys.
Thanks, Tomer. Panel is about data mesh in practice, talking about challenges to overcome, how to approach building a data mesh organization. And we're very fortunate to have Raja from Shell, who is undergoing this journey today. So to kick us off on this data mesh in practice panel, Raja, I'd love to ask you why you undertook this journey and how you approached it at Shell, and where you are as well.
Yeah, so hi. So for us, like we started with this project. When we initially started, it was, we didn't really think of it like a data mesh, right? So we started, okay, hey, there is this requirement, and we had a Shell Energy team who needed forecasting data. And they try to get this data from different varieties of sources, and they have their own account, everything. And we are, our team is a machine learning team, like so load forecasting team, where we enable them with machine learning, load forecasting, and provide the results. When we started the journey, okay, how do we get this data from these various sources? Then the first step is to write, hey, do I want to write all this ETL, bring in, right? And then again, the ownership of the data, who is going to own this data, and how are we going to get it here? Is this the right approach, right? And that is where we started the journey with Dremio 2, right? So when we explored Dremio, we started exploring it as a lakehouse platform, right? So then it was easy for us to onboard our Shell Energy team, like bring in different data sources, like they had SQL Server, MongoDB, like, and even they have their own AWS account, S3 data, all that stuff. now it was very easy for us to onboard them into Dremio, and then we were able to access this data from them. This is where our journey started, and then currently where we are at is we are like towards almost there. I mean, I shouldn't say that, like we have a mini data mesh, maybe I'll put it in that way. So we have this data which is completely controlled by Cell Energy team, and we use that data. We add machine learning to our thing, and then we share back the forecast back to them. So ours is with this domain we share back the data to them. So this is where we stand actually. So I can go into more details, but maybe
that's a great start. Thanks so much for giving us the context and where you are at the data mesh journey right now. I know a lot of folks don't go from 0 to 100 all in one go.
Right.
Roger, from what you described, there is some sort of mesh-like architecture that you need to achieve along the way. And I'm going to ask Zhamak and Ugo and Tomer about this in a bit. So the one thing I wanted to ask about before we moved forward is you've talked a lot about the technical underpinnings of why you wanted to undergo the data mesh journey. You have a lot of data in different places, and you wanted to bring that all together and help teams onboard in a self-service manner. So this resonates with the self-service data platform principle of the data mesh post from Zhamak. That's, I think, technical underpinnings is just one side of the data mesh coin. Data mesh also talks about organizational structure and enabling that side as well. So before we get to the rest of the panelists here, can you touch upon the organizational aspect of your journey at Shell as well? So you've done the technical side. Did you have to convince someone to undergo this journey as well of self-service at Shell?
No, actually, at least the self-service part was the good thing about it, right? So honestly to say, that was a quick win for us. Like, so in the way we used Dremio for bringing in the sources, right? And it's big, and all our data was SQL oriented, right? And we have this big data in SQL, and users were able to leverage Dremio for running all these queries and stuff. Couple of points there, right? So when we brought this data, it was very easy for us to onboard non-technical users. That was the good thing about the whole journey. Like, so we had like business analysts who now they can go in, they can write the queries and take a look at the data lineage in Dremio and then find out, hey, where is this data coming from? Where is that data coming from? And when our team wants some data, like we don't have to worry about how to get this data and all this stuff. We can go back and talk to them saying, hey, I need this data. They are the experts in that data ownership. So it's very easy for them to figure out where this data is coming, getting that, and for us to use. Yeah.
Thanks. So there's a lot of elements of the self-serve experience with data products for your data teams at Shell. So what are a couple of challenges that you had to overcome in order to get to where you are right now?
Yeah, the challenges, right? One of the key challenges, I think many people might face this too. So because, as I told, like we have this, so the data is provided by other team, right? So any issue with the data, right? Then the cycle of it, right? To make sure we go back to them and they have to fix the data coming back to us. That takes some time. And also the standardization, because like when we talk to different teams, each team might try to do their own way of things, right? And we need to ensure that there is a standard across here, and then making sure we are able to get data in a standard way. The other thing is the accuracy and timeliness of the data. So when I need to run the job today, okay, do I have all the data that I need? And do I get it in a timely way and in an accurate way? So those are the things. And governance is another aspect to it, right? So when we talk about governance here, like with Dremio, we were able to achieve most of the things. Like we have this fine-grained access control. So we are able to set this access control at data set level, all these things. But still, because it is a distributed architecture, like, so again, we have, so sometimes when people move from centralized to a distributed way of things, right, they we don't know if the right governance is applied and is it handled properly. So that is another challenge I see coming up there.
Awesome. Thanks for outlining those challenges. There's challenges all around the computational governance perspective and that principle of data mesh. There's the data lineage and also the standardization of data as well, and how to enforce those uniform access controls and rules as you have different data sets. So that brings me, to the rest of the panelists. Raj has talked about some of the challenges that they have faced at Shell in practice, boots on the ground, implementing and building data mesh at Shell. And there are some specific challenges, sounds like a lot around the technology and the governance side that you've had to overcome to get to this first step at Shell. So going from a monolithic to distributed architecture and making sure you approach that in a safe and governed manner. So Zhamak and Ugo, so starting with Zhamak, how does Raj's challenges and that experience compare to the companies that you work with, and what are, if they're similar, or if they're different, what are the other challenges that companies need to be aware of when implementing data mesh?
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of smiling a little bit from a place of empathy, of course, when he was mentioning standardization, ownership of the data. So what data mesh, just going back to the origin of data mesh, why this matters at all. We are moving toward decentralization of data because we have to act on data at the speed of market. The automated decision-making, AI and ML need to be as close as possible to the business. So this idea that we get the data from different places, we put it in one place, nice, and we have a data team governing it, and then serving that data to other people creates this long lead time from where the data is to where the value is, and in the middle of it, we have put a bottleneck, right? So that, and we've seen this before. I think the reason data mesh as a concept was so overwhelmingly received was because we had seen this before. Early days of digitization, moving to different teams, building applications and creating digital touch points, we had no choice but breaking down the monolith and giving responsibility of different services to different teams. So I think that's the foundation of it. That's the nirvana we're trying to get to. The challenge is going from this very monolithic, centralized thinking about the data, the domain people that actually know the data best often are oblivious to even the data that needs to be provided and shared, and bring the business domains along. So that human factor of now you are responsible for your data, you're using it for yourself, for your business objectives, and also you're sharing it with the rest of the organization. That's quite a mindset to change, because before they were just expecting that somebody else down the stream will take care of the data. So I think the mindset change, and with any mindset change, often we say the words. It's easy to say, oh, we're doing data mesh, we have the data product, but shifting and really changing the behavior, that's really hard. And that's where you need technology to help you reshape behavior, right? So I think the top challenges that I see and we are focusing on in terms of enablement is organizationally is getting business teams to come along with that distributed ownership and accept that distributed ownership. From the technology perspective, how do we enable them? What does the codification of data product look like? What is this long-standing thing that we're going to maintain, so that creating a standard or common way of creating data products, sharing data products, and how do we make sure that these common standards or APIs for accessing and using data products for analytical use case, they are governed, right? So have your cake, decentralized ownership, so you can move faster, you can make decisions closer to the business, have those data products discovered and used in a common way, eat it too, and don't get fat. Yep. Have governance on top of it as well, right? Built in. So these are the top 3 problems that we see, and it is part of it is organizational, part of it technology enablement.
Mm-hmm. Zhamak, thank you. Sorry. Ugo, do you want to add some thoughts on the Agile Lab side?
Yeah, I mean, very interesting to hear that talking about organizational issue, we went talking about, standardization. Actually, the 2 things are very connected in a big enterprise. And, common law reflects the organization into the technical implementation, and this is also high level. In the context that I work, It is one of the top 3 utilities worldwide in the energy industry. It's a big organization, matrix organization that is structured in several ways, several dimensions. You can have a business lines, global functions, and the regionals mixed together in several ways. In that case, you may see that every unit or every dimension of this big organization is going to have different technologies, different technological stacks. And of course, the organization and the way they work will be different for each unit, like with working in Agile, with working in Waterfall. Let's say the so-called DevOps maturity is not even normalized across all those big enterprises. So it's very difficult to find a standard in this situation. The way you can break the way for standards is, of course, data mesh has a big opportunities to get into this problem and solve this problem. And finding a standard is, of course, an organizational issue, because you put together and make them agree about some standards, very different contexts and environments. This is a nice point. Other around organization are, of course, politics, because you know, anyone that can have an area of influence where to you know, decide which kind of technologies can be part of the platform implementation of a data mesh. Of course, they want to be involved, but they want to influence the decision to, I don't know, say some owned technologies, or say some different criteria than the business enablement that can come from the development of a data mesh platform, regardless the technology. And other things I can mention are, of course, at the level of the organization, at the different modalities. I was mentioning that. And of course, you are building a platform team that is going to develop the entire platform. This platform team will not be independent from other teams or other departments, or even areas of the company. Just to mention some examples: IT infrastructure, security, and cybersecurity, or whatever you know, cross-cutting concerns that are usually siloed in some of the company departments. They will influence, and they will work as dependencies for a platform team to work. All this is a big organizational issues that must be addressed somehow. And I mean, our experience, my experience is that there is not a single pattern that works. Linking many different departments to make a platform team work well is very difficult and challenging. You must address every single channel in a very careful way.
Thanks very much. So I think you've touched upon a lot of different things from technology, but mostly a lot of your response there was centered around the organization, right? So, and also your note about everyone, there's no single view or no single right answer to implementing data mesh. So Raj's got their own view or own implementation of data mesh. Ugo, I'm sure with the customers that you've worked with, all have their own, you know, shape or form for data mesh, right? Technically, you know, it fits within the bounds of data mesh. It looks like a mesh-like thing. So that differs from what's in the text, right? So my question to each of the panelists here is, in your experience, how does, what does this mesh-like first step look like for anyone looking to go to achieve a full data mesh vision? What is the core set of competencies from a technical side that you need to overcome? and you need to achieve if you wanted to get started on this journey? So maybe Zhamak.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. So to your point that I'm really bad at answering straight questions, so maybe I just go back a little bit, wind back. You mentioned that the incarnation of, I guess, data mesh in different organizations looks different, and that was kind of intentional. So when I put the concept out there, I articulated the problem, and then the principles behind a solution. There was never a particular reference implementation to say, like, that's a North Star, that's what it looks like. And that was intentional to invite people to come up with different practices, different technologies, different ways of implementing it. So that's why we see this diversity. And I think, like any new concept, we go through a hockey stick of adoption. Things would look kind of ugly and maybe hard to implement. And then, we converge, we diverge, and then we converge, and then we get, those efforts somewhat converge, and we standardize certain things so we don't reinvent the wheel in every single implementation of data mesh, and we harmonize in some places and we diversify in others, and that life would get better. So that, again, that's why we see that diversification. We're still in the bottom of that hockey stick, in my opinion. To answer your question now, okay, if you want to get started, what does that first step look like? I would say that you really need to think about this as an end-to-end thin slice. The thing about the pillars, they're nice because cognitively help us unpack a problem to say, okay, domain ownership, data as a product, self-serve platform, computational governance. But the challenge with those is that people say, okay, I can do the domain ownership, we'll do the data product later, and computational governance, I don't even understand what that means, so we do that some other time. And the challenge with that is that you don't really get that end, the impact you're looking for, which is, and the litmus test you should be looking for, which is how long does it take for someone, for a data analyst, for a business that has an analytical question, or they want to apply a machine learning, how long does it take from that hypothesis, from that question, to get access to data, to apply that data into the business? So if you're not doing all those pillars, perhaps a thin slice of it, I'm not sure if we're moving that fast. We might be moving fast, but we might be breaking things because we didn't put policy in place. So my observation and how we, at least in the past, I've implemented the data measures, it was pick a thin slice end to end and implement a hello world version of domain ownership, a data as a product. So, and start with business use cases. Start with, some of the use cases that requires, access to analytical data to one or two domains. Start with one or two domains, walk backward, and then identify those domains, identify the data as a product that need to be shared, and then build enough of the platform, enough of those technology pieces that creates that, from use case accessing the data products and applying it into the business, and just build enough of that. So do not go, I guess, pillar by pillar. Go thin across and broad. And when you do that, then the type of technology solutions you need to have in place are around decide what does data product mean to you? What does it look like, right? When you touch it, like, is this a service with APIs? Is this a file on a disk? Is it a view? Everyone has a different, I guess, interpretation. Get an agreement on that, and kind of enable the access to it. Build just enough of the policy, like the very first important policy is access control, right? Retention and quality metrics and so on, they will come back. They will come later. And then just thin slice end to end, rinse and repeat to kind of expand your mesh and go deeper in terms of technical capabilities.
So start with a thin slice that encompasses all four principles and pillars, and then you can go deeper if you'd like. So get to that hello world state first and build upon
exactly. And use existing real business use cases, real people, real domains as a vehicle for execution of those thin slices. Do not build something in abstraction or in isolation. What I've seen a lot of companies do, they say, okay, we shall go and build the platform, and they will come and use this platform. And you go and spend, years of millions of dollars building a platform that nobody wants. I mean, I absolutely agree with Ugo that even the idea of a single platform is flawed, because when you go to organizations, half of the organization on Snowflake, the other half on something else, and you never get humans agree. So find the absolute minimum that we all have to agree upon, right? If I go back to having seen this in my career before, when we went from monolithic applications to microservices, the reason that technology movement was successful was very, very basic minimal thing that we agreed upon, which was use web for intercommunication. And that was it. We use HTTP. And that liberated us to use any technology for implementation we wanted. So again, when you're starting, don't start build a big platform and then they will come and use it. No, let's find out what's the absolute minimum to connect those seams between the data products, build that, and use those use cases for execution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, though, that when you get started, you're right. Getting started with kind of one specific use case or a few specific use cases is important, because if you don't have quick wins, then ultimately people get tired of management gets tired of the initiative. Why are we spending all this money? But I do think it's important to make technology decisions that are kind of future-proofing you, right? That you're not going to get locked in. And at this conference we've been talking a lot about kind of open data architecture and things like Apache Iceberg as what's looking now like the new kind of standard way of representing data, where you have many different systems, whether it's Dremio or Snowflake or the AWS stack or the Google stack or so forth, all supporting that same standard. So I do think if you make the choices that allow you to then scale up in the future, because the data mesh isn't about one group at the end of the day, right? It's all about building something that scales throughout the organization, right? And so making technology choices, ideally, that will allow you to scale like that to the rest of the organization. And I think also, because it's such a strategic platform that you're building and a strategic architecture, something that will be okay in the future, down the road, right? Where potentially some of the things you'll use to process data don't even exist today. It's a startup that is just being created today, or will be created next year, right? You want to make sure that that's going to be something you'll be able to use. And so, in my opinion, like making those kinds of choices, such as Iceberg, such as Parquet, right? Really kind of standards that are supported broadly and will be supported for many years to come. I think that's really important versus, choosing something, whether it's a specific data warehouse, right? That, today is popular, tomorrow won't be popular, right? Yeah. This isn't like developers choosing MongoDB for this app and Postgres for that app and MySQL for that app, which is okay, right? If you're just building OLTP apps, every developer can do it, whatever they want, and you'll be fine, right? But this is a little bit different, I think.
Okay. Plus 100 to that one. Data mesh is about interoperability and doing AI and analytics in a distributed way. And you start with decisions that are bound to an organization, let's say, but very quickly, the data doesn't, like even the simplest and today modern data-driven organizations, when you look at their data landscape, and I'm sure Shell would be the same as well, data doesn't come even from the same organization. It comes from across the boundaries of organizations. So I think data mesh is just a stepping stone toward this very collaborative ecosystem of responsible data sharing for analytics and ML. So I absolutely agree that decisions if we want to make, it can't be, as long as you're on this one vendor and technology, it will work. Otherwise, your mesh breaks. So I think we're just putting the building blocks in place to have this global data sharing the same way that, if I build an application today, I use APIs from many different organizations that don't even belong to me, right? Through APIs and through those API-based standardization, I think the same, we can learn similar lessons from the past with regard to data mesh.
Mm-hmm. So Tomer, you bring a good point about technology. A lot of the discussion so far has been organizational challenges with approaching data mesh. But Tomer, you bring a spotlight onto the technology side and talking about future-proofing. From the technology side, when you talk with customers, what are some of the key capabilities that they're looking for as they're trying to build data mesh, as they relate to things like self-service and governance?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, data mesh is, it's not just technology. It's not just kind of organizational, right? It's kind of both, right? In fact, I was having many conversations yesterday here in San Francisco at Subsurface about, companies and, Fortune 10 companies having challenges around the organization, and how do How do you make sure that the different businesses really take ownership of the quality of their data, right? And so there's only so much you can do as a platform if you're not able to convince the organization to act that way. But there are also very important requirements when it comes to the platform, which we talked about some yesterday at the keynote. So if you haven't watched that, definitely recommend that. But at the end of the day, the platform has to provide that ability for people to operate, and have domain ownership and manage data as a product. And for example, the things we've done at Dremio, right? Being able to connect to a variety of different data sources and all the different BI tools, and being able to create a semantic layer in the middle, which makes it much simpler to kind of expose the right data to the right user with all the kind of permissions, row level, column level permissions, all those kinds of things. The organization has to take advantage of these technologies and apply them. Because permissions don't set themselves. Somebody has to decide what is sensitive data and what's not sensitive data, and who's allowed to see that sensitive data. That's a business policy decision. We're very excited about the work around Dremio Arctic and Project Nessie. Bringing kind of the ideas of GitHub to data, right? Because when you think about data as a product, how do we build products today when it comes to software and source code, right? We don't just put source code in some file repository in some NetApp filer and say, oh, everybody can collaborate on that source code, right? We use things like GitHub, where we have the ability for people to work in isolation with branches, and we have the ability to recover very easily from mistakes, and we have the ability to go back in time and see who changed what source code and when, right? All these things have allowed much more agility, much better hygiene and governance around source code. And all of that really applies to data as well, right? We think about data and data engineering work, whether it's the ingestion, the data quality, the data governance. You need all those capabilities, and so that's the reason that we created Dremio Arctic, to allow that, and to allow that in a very open way. Again, going back to the idea of data mesh, it's an organizational-wide thing, and some people are going to maybe use Dremio for SQL, but other people will use Flink for streaming, or Spark for batch processing, and they should all be able to see the same tables, same version control, the same branching capabilities. That should span all of that, right? And so that's the reason we created that. And Iceberg kind of fits very nicely into that, because it's a standard table format that can be plugged into all these different technologies.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Tomer. Yeah, I'm excited about Arctic. It brings a whole new meaning when you think about data as a product, right? So thinking about software products and bringing that to the paradigm of data, right? Adding something else you can think about when you're going through the data mesh journey and thinking about what does it mean for data to be a product. So, Tomer, you've shared your views on technology, and technology is absolutely essential in order to enable data mesh, right? So technology needs to enable teams to undergo data mesh. There's the organization that you have to convince to go down this journey from a structural perspective. But I think a third component of data mesh really are the people and the teams that are part of the domains, people who are running the self-service infrastructure of data mesh. So Raja, you've talked about the technology perspective, talked about some of the challenges, you've talked about organizational as well, and where you are right now. But how much of a challenge is enabling the actual teams at Shell to get to this mindset and to operate this technological foundation and this platform for data mesh? Can you say a couple words about that?
Yeah, this is a very good point. Like surprisingly, there is an open mindset now, because so even in Shell, like our top leadership, like there is a shift in the way we are approaching. So earlier we were like a platform team, yesterday I was talking about PDC team. We were a platform team. Now we are migrating to a different way of working, which is called product line and product-based teams. So now what this product-based team is actually a combination of business users and technical users. So this we are kind of shifting to that pattern. Like rather than we were just trying to be a platform, now we focus on the product from the business perspective and from technical perspective. So with this, it's really going to help us to speed up this journey and then make sure, okay, as a product, I can really focus on making sure I have the right technology in place, right processes in place, right governance, everything in place, and then make sure this product is self-sufficient, right? So it can be self-served.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. I like that structural change going from that platform team to now you have domain teams that combine business and technical users all working off that centralized data platform. So
it's not going to be centralized anymore. That's something I want to correct here. So one of the journey when we started was that whole like monolithic centralized thing. Like we really want to get away from that, right? So the whole distributed way, and then each team is responsible for their own technology choice, the way they maintain the data. Again, still it has to be an open standard, but still like each team will have their flexibility to maintain whatever they want, like from data perspective to technology perspective to the product. So they define what it is.
So going from that change at Shell, how big of an ask was that to make this structural change? So bringing it back to the organization, you had to go through this transition. How big of a lift was that?
No, we are still in the process, so it has not happened yet. So, but what I'm saying, there is a shift happening everywhere. So that's what I was talking about. So, or at least from my perspective.
Got it. Okay, so you're still undergoing this change.
Yeah.
Ugo, I want to ask you a similar question, right? With the customers you've worked with, there's the platform technology, but as Agile Lab, you do a lot of consulting and making data mesh possible, especially in the European region. So how much of a lift is the technology enablement for these domain teams as they make a shift to this data mesh mindset?
Well, the technology has an important role, but I mean, I want to bring a different perspective on what technology can enable, because actually what is more important is to preserve practices, I believe. I mean, data mesh is like crunching many data engineering practices, DevOps practices, agile practices, and having a framework to make them work very well in an integrated manner across different partners, different cultures in the same company. This is very difficult. And so a technology is good if a technology can reinforce a practice that is good by itself. If you can, you have to achieve a point where you can keep the practice and replace the technology because the practice is stronger than the technology. And until you get to this point, that is very important, you have to reach a certain level of maturity of your practice. You may arrive to this point iteratively, and but this is the right point to achieve if you want to survive big technological changes or bad events like companies failing or whatever is a disrupting technology that is entering the market. You want to survive and adopt the new technology. You know, to don't lose the wave. So in this sense, open standards and technologies, the work on open standards, they are a good enabler because they can survive to specific technologies, give the opportunity to the company to make a long-standing decision, long-term decision, and you know, all the vendor lock-in features that maybe they can solve a specific problem, they can enable a specific capabilities at that moment, they will make you rely on that feature forever. And maybe that you are going to rely too much on that feature. And this will bring you in the so-called lock-in that is actually a big issue when you want to get away from that technology. So, I mean, my, let's say, recommendation is to go for practices, understand which are the open standards that make your practices work, and then choose the technologies on the basis of those practices.
Got it. Thanks, Ugo. So start off with open standards, then get onto that technology that will enable that and make that a reality. So,
by the way, I think a lot of the things we're talking about here are things that also exist in the world of software engineering, right? When you think about all the kind of responsibility that developers and developer teams are taking on themselves, right? These days, maybe different from 20 years ago, around doing their own testing, right? And having all the testing be automated. I know at Dremio, for example, when we think about our product and our Dremio Cloud, so much automation goes into that, right? Where each team that's building a microservice is responsible for making sure that's well tested. They're responsible for being on call, and when something goes wrong, they take ownership of that. It's not one kind of isolated, centralized team that's responsible for these things, as it was maybe a couple of decades ago when I was working at Microsoft. Things were very different, right? It was a completely different team that was doing the testing and operations and things like that. So I think in some ways, data mesh is bringing these same principles to the world of data, right? The data team is the business team that owns the data, is responsible for testing it and checking that things are still okay and the pipeline is still working, and versus a centralized team that might not even understand that data, certainly not as well. And so that's I think a lot of the same kind of similarities we're seeing that, and a lot of this is common sense, right? It's how we have to solve this tension that we have between centralized team demanding rightfully governance and security, and business teams wanting to move fast and be agile. And so bringing these principles is a lot of common sense. And Zhamak, thank you for making this top of mind for most companies in the world now. It's made things a lot easier for companies and for technology providers as well.
Yeah, and thank you for supporting it. I think if I had a magic wand and I could wish for one thing, would have been actually next time, maybe in 5 years, when we come to these sort of conferences, it's not a data conference and then there's an app software conference. It is just digital technology conference and embedded, software, building software and applications, or building AI and ML. This is all just one thing. These are not separate, bifurcations of branches of technology. And data mesh indeed attempted to do that. So creating these developer experiences that are, they resonate with an average or a typical developer, and we don't look for a specialization anymore, and everyone can work with data or build apps or run AI and ML. It's just the same technology landscape that we work with and similar experiences we're creating.
I hope we get to that vision in 5 years at the Digital Technology Conference. So we have 2 minutes left. Folks, thank you so much for all your insights here. I want to end this panel with a mini lightning round. So for the audience tuning in across the globe, each panelist, what is one piece of advice you would have to anyone wanting to build a data mesh? Could be anything. Where you start, what you look for. What's your piece of advice, Ugo?
I will say to don't trivialize data mesh initiative with quick wins that don't bring to any results, and go for to focus on entry point that can really leverage the initiative. Look for people that wants to change, and for people that need to change, and work on the minimal viable data platform that can deliver the minimal viable data mesh.
Thank you. Tomer?
Sign up for Dremio Cloud in 5 seconds. No, I think I agree with you. Get started with a project, something that you can demonstrate a quick win. I think that's always the best way to get started, and allows you to do a lot more afterwards.
Quick wins and change agents. Raja?
For me, I would say, from my perspective, it's the business users. So try to involve the business users, try to see what is their quick value they want to look at it, right? Try to build that quick and then share it, right? In our case, what we did is we brought in these data sources quickly and enable the users, and we shared the data across. That was a quick win which enabled us more in this journey. So I would recommend involving business users and getting the key point and going in that journey.
So bring everything back to the business. Zhamak?
I agree with all those points. Maybe I just add something to those. Think about the largest population of technologists that you have to mobilize to build, use, share data products, and those are developers. So enabling and empowering developers with technologies that is native to them to use, it's key, and come and talk to us if you're interested in doing that.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise with the world here. Anyone tuning in. We hope you have a great rest of the conference. Have a great day, and please feel free to reach out to any of our panelists if you want to learn more about data mesh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.